Welcome to the Love of the Star podcast. I'm Bobby Belt, Dallas Cowboys insider for 105.3 The Fan in Dallas, joined as always by former Super Bowl winning NFL scout Brian Broaddus. He is now the co-host of the G-Bag Nation, 2 to 7 p.m. Central, Monday through Friday. He's also the pre- and post-game co-host on the Dallas Cowboys radio network, and he's a big fan of catfish. I learned today. Loves catching them. Loves just noodling. He likes to go in there, do the straight noodling with his arm. Brian, how you doing today, man?
And that voice is of Bobby Belt, who is trying to antagonize me tonight as we get started with this show. Bobby is part of RJ and Sean and RJ with Bobby, 5:30 to 10 every morning, Monday through Friday. Also the Cowboys insider for 105.3 The Fan, and also our host here of Love of the Star podcast and of the Draft Show. And you can listen to the Draft Show every Wednesday and Thursday. So yes, Bobby, catfishing is not my favorite thing to do, and I've never noodled in my life. The only noodles I like come in like maybe an Italian dish.
Yeah, sure.
I like.
I got you. It's funny when you guys were talking about that on G-Bag today, and you were mentioning the weirdest thing you've ever pulled up, and you said it was a catfish while fishing. I'll tell you what, and we'll get started here shortly. We used to fish on this golf course where there were always like pretty good bass and everything else there. One time we pulled a drum out of there. Not like the instrument, but the actual fish, like a red drum.
That's a terrible fish. It's
an ugly, gross fish. But we pulled that out and it's like, I have no idea how this got in here.
Yeah, that's what I'm saying.
Never.
When we fish and there's like at the lake and when we catch a catfish, it's like it's so rare because of what we tried to do with the lake and stuff. So yeah, I'm not used to pulling up catfish, but there were a lot of people that caught a lot of weird things that were texting in today. So all I can say is keep fishing,
Yeah, that's what you got to do.
Just keep fishing.
We're about to hit springtime. It's going to be peak fishing season here. Brian, we do have a little bit of we're going to talk a lot of combine and draft in today's show, but we do have a little bit of late breaking news as we record this. Several different people, Tom Pelissero, Jordan Renan, different folks reporting that Odell Beckham Jr. is going to hold a workout for NFL teams on Friday in Arizona, and that this will be a chance for him to show what he's got, what he can do. Would you expect that the Dallas Cowboys will be out there, Brian?
I would say that somebody from the pro personnel department would be at that workout. Right now, I think the college scouts are on break
until next week. Yep.
Until next week. So I don't think they have a scout that lives in that area. Bobby, you know where all these scouts live better than me. That maybe there's somebody. Do they have a California scout?
They do.
They have somebody that lives in California.
I'll tell you. No, they don't have that. I'll tell you what they could do.
Kubiak? Does Kubiak live in Colorado?
I think he does. Yeah, I'm not sure. But I do know that he splits time as a national scout on the college side, and he also does pro scouting work. So he might be a natural fit. But it'll be interesting to see if anybody goes out there and has anything like that. How do you feel at this point, Brian, about the prospects of Odell Beckham Jr. as a Cowboy? Do you think this is eventually just something that we're going to see happen?
I've said this a bunch on our shows on 105.3. I've said it for DallasCowboys.com with the break with Derek and Nick and Ambar. I just feel like, Bobby, there's been so much legwork on this. There's been so much legwork by Adam Pacifica and Todd Williams and, Stephen Jones. And, unless somebody in the organization has stood up, and when they brought Odell in, if somebody stood up and said, hey, Jerry, we do not need this guy for this reason or this reason, or, I don't know how many guys over there or gals have been a dissenting voice. There could be a couple that they might really, really trust, and there might be some that have not said a bad thing about Odell Beckham at all. I feel like that the Cowboys, this is their type of move. It just seems like to me that they've worked really, really hard on this, and they try to get it done during the football season. And now they have a little bit better understanding. They're a little bit further along. The pressure of getting ready for a season is not there. So yeah, I could see where they absolutely try and get this done.
Yeah, and I that's where I think some of this discussion about a big move coming and things like that. If they sign Odell Beckham Jr., I think fans should be prepared for the Cowboys saying, "There it is. That's it. That's the one. That's the big move that we made." And I feel like the gravity of that is more impactful when we were discussing about the potential of doing it in December, when you're in the middle of the year and it's a shot in the arm that you weren't going to be able to get anywhere else. Now that you're hitting free agency, there are different people who are going to be available to acquire. You're in draft season. You can get younger players who may be more efficient, for cost versus production than Odell Beckham Jr. So now I don't feel like it makes as much sense. I was willing to pay the premium and even lock in for another year if it meant getting the opportunity to add a player mid-season, late season, that nobody else was going to be able to add a player of that caliber. It was really going to give you an advantage to improve your football team in December that, it was not easily acquired. Now I don't know so much. But it's something that, we'll keep an eye on it. I feel like eventually this is just Odell ends up here in some form or fashion at some point. Now when is that some point? I don't know. As a Texas Rangers fan, I remember the years of flirtation about Lance Berkman was eventually going to become a Ranger, and sure enough, he did. But he was 38 and he didn't care anymore, and it didn't really have much of an impact. That's kind of how I feel like this is. It may be now. It may be something where a year and a half from now is when Odell Beckham Jr. gets here. But I feel like at some point in his career, Odell Beckham Jr. is going to wear a star. I just don't know how much of an impact it's going to make.
Well, there's several wide receivers that are out on the market. One of the ones we were talking about, I mean, if Juju Smith-Schuster was the guy, I know the 33rd team, if you're not familiar with the 33rd team's work, that's the organization that was started by Mike Tannenbaum. It's
Great
got a lot
stuff.
it's got a lot of former NFL coaches. It's got former NFL general managers. It's got former players. There was Greg Jennings put out his top 10 free agent receivers, and Odell Beckham was not on his list. But it's funny, Noah Brown was number 9 on his list. So
interesting.
Yeah, so Greg Jennings, he was talking about with Smith-Schuster, Slayton from the Giants was the top of a guy. So yeah, it's there are wide receivers out there that won't cost you the money or the cap space that Odell Beckham will cost you, but and a little bit younger and probably a little bit more healthy. So as much as I think that this is going to get done, I don't know. I mean, because there's you and I, Zach Wolchuk and Aisha Morrison had a really good discussion Thursday morning on the draft show about wide receivers and who was going to be there. And, if, say, Johnston, the receiver from TCU, were to somehow get to you, would you take him? You had your concerns about his playing strength, and rightfully so. He's a tall, thin guy. But the Cowboys, I don't think there's a really great option out there unless you're going to potentially trade for Hopkins. That to me, if you're willing to give up a second-round pick and take that contract on, then there's your fix at wide receiver to go along with CeeDee Lamb and Gallup and have Hopkins. That would be a pretty formidable group, I think. But that's your best fix, because depending on what you trust with these wide receivers in the draft, the ones in free agency, or going out and getting an Odell Beckham that a lot of people might think is broke down, there's those are really your best options.
Well, we'll keep an eye on the Odell Beckham Jr. market.
How do you feel? How do you feel? I mean, you made a really good point about Johnston from, I don't
Mhm.
think Smith and Jigba from Ohio State gets to you. I just don't. I
I don't
think that,
either.
I mean, you might have a shot at getting Johnston. Hyatt from Tennessee might be a guy that you might be interested in. We'll see if, in fact, that he could get to you. But I think it's really kind of a little bit of a crapshoot. I don't think this wide receiver group, and if you listen to us here on this show and on the draft show and our regular radio programs, I don't think this is one of the kind of wide receiver group that we've seen of the last 2-3 years for sure.
Yeah, we're obviously a little down on some of these receivers, and they are. I think a lot of these guys are good football players and have a chance to be really good football players. And I think there's some depth at receiver in the draft. I think there's some decent targets. There's not any of those big name studs. There's not the Jamar Chase, Justin Jefferson, CeeDee Lamb. Like, it's not those guys this year. Now maybe they end up becoming those guys. Like I mean that's certainly possible. But just as prospects, how we grade them coming out, there's not a lot to be excited about. I think you can see warts on just about all of them. We talk about Quentin Johnston. I think Quentin Johnston has tremendous upside, and I think he could potentially be a really good player. There are questions, I think, at times in terms of his toughness making catches in traffic. There's some focus drops at times, I think. The getting off of press is going to be a big thing for him, and his play strength is going to be a big thing for him. Jordan Addison, I thought, who I'm a big fan of and think he's a really good route runner and everything else. But man, when you talk about a guy who weighs 173 pounds and then he's running at, a borderline 4.5, his vertical's 34, he's barely jumping 10 feet in the broad. It's a little like, okay, that's concerning testing for a guy as small as you are. And then Smith and Jigba is a guy who, has dealt with injuries. And, I think there are some questions about there's a little bit of a projection there too with Smith and Jigba, I think, instead of just like, this is a high floor, no concerns type of player. And so the receivers are going to put you in a bit of a bind. You may hit on one of them. One of them may be a stud. I'll tell you, Brian, one thing that I'm starting to think, and we've talked about this name before, but if you don't get a tight end in the first round or anything else, or you draft a different position, if you're sitting there in the second round, and I don't think you would be on board with this in the second, but I think I could be talked into Cedric Tillman in the second round.
I don't have a problem with Cedric Tillman.
Wide receiver, Tennessee.
Yeah, I don't have a problem with him. I really don't. I think when you watch him play, I was okay. I didn't feel like that there was a guy that was fast, and I didn't, it reminded me, and maybe this is not a bad thing. Cedric Tillman from Tennessee reminded me of these guys you see playing at the LA Chargers. That receiving crew that the Chargers have. You got guys that have really dependable hands. You see them just steady, the way they run their routes, how physical they are. This guy will run through arm tackles. He's kind of somewhat of a bully. I kind of see those guys at the Chargers, a little bit of a bully. He's going to play opposite of Hyatt. And I thought it was a really nice 1-2 punch. One guy could really fly. One guy was really a vertical player. I just didn't see Tillman as being that guy, that, fast and quick kind of twitch guy. But I felt like he ran better than I thought he was going to run at the combine. So,
yeah,
maybe, testing and training will help you in that regard to run faster. If he can kind of have that as his play speed, I feel like you would have a guy. But, the guy that Bobby, that people, the people that believe in the metrics, the numbers, and what they translate to. But here's a guy that's slightly built, but there's not much size to his frame. The guy I'm talking about is Marvin Mims from Oklahoma. Now, there's some physical toughness to Marvin Mims as a player. And you could see him run through arm tackles and stuff and run away from defenders. He makes things happen with the ball in his hands. If that's kind of what the Cowboys have in Oklahoma with CeeDee Lamb, throw him the ball, let him run. That was what, Lamb was just a taller, thinner guy. But this Marvin Mims, if you look at all the physical testing and the metrics and relate to that, Marvin Mims should be a first-round player if you follow the testing. The tape is good. The only thing that you worry about him a little bit is there are times when you watch him match up on the outside and he will struggle to get off the line a little bit. That's the only thing, but the balance, the body control, the hands, the feet, I mean, he's a super, super productive player, and his slight build, might turn some scouts off. But if you look at the testing numbers, that shouldn't turn anybody off.
Yeah, I mean, he tested really impressive. When you look at the way he went out there, 4.38 40-yard dash, almost a 40-inch vertical, almost 11 feet on the broad jump, 6'9" 3-cone. Really, really impressive. Been productive. I think you're right. I think the question about him is how adept is he at getting open when he's outside, in terms of or not getting open, but how well does he project at getting open at the NFL level on the outside? That could be a problem for him, and you're going to have to project there a little bit. Back to Tillman, I'm going to make one comparison for you real quick. Yeah. And I want you to tell me if it's a bad one, because the player I'm about to compare him to, I believe you would have scouted pretty heavily.
Okay.
Does Cedric Tillman, and this is a blast from the past, Cedric Tillman remind you of Marty Booker?
Was the old Chicago Bears?
Yep, 1999. Louisiana Monroe, third-round pick.
Yeah.
That's who I think. That's honestly, whenever I've watched Tillman, that's the name that comes to mind to me, is Marty Booker. Generally a possession receiver, but incredibly tough at the catch point.
Yeah.
Somebody who we talk about the whole my ball mentality last year.
Right.
Cedric Tillman is my ball, and Cedric Tillman is not going to shy away from anything. You're never going to see the old Todd Pinkston, Freddie Mitchell alligator arms. You're never going to see that with Cedric Tillman. So I think in terms of when you talk about timing-based routes and catching in traffic and some of these quick slants, I think Tillman, it doesn't bug me so much that he's not a burner.
Yeah, but the thing you're right about Tillman, because like I say, I have the utmost respect for those Chargers receivers. But I mean, and just going through my notes again, this guy is, I mean, he for a big man, is one of my notes. For a big man, he can make adjusting receptions in a small space. So if you could do those kinds of things, you're good with your feet, you're steady with your routes, and you're fast enough, then I think there's some merit to having you in this league.
You're listening to the Love of the Star podcast. The Love of the Star is an Odyssey podcast. You can get it on the Odyssey app or wherever you get your podcasts. All right, Brian, continuing with some of this combine theme, before we jump into some metrics, some research that I was doing today, I'm curious in general, just for your thoughts, what were some of your bigger takeaways from the combine, some of the testing that you saw, just some of the impressions that you had? I know you spoke glowingly of Marvin Mims. We've all chatter about Anthony Richardson, the quarterback from Florida. I know A.T. Perry, a guy you liked, ran better than probably some people were expecting.
Right.
But in general, what were some of your larger takeaways from what we got out of the combine?
I'll say this, Bobby. I was really keeping an eye on these cornerbacks, and I'm saying corner with a C, and those kids were flying. I mean, they were flying. When those numbers came out, guys in the 4.3s consistently, they were able to test. I thought the corners did a really, really nice job. Now, what was also a little bit disconcerting to me was Emmanuel Forbes, who I absolutely love, the cornerback from Mississippi State.
Yep.
When he measured in at 166 pounds, my heart dropped. You know, I'm like, my God, how could this guy be this good of a football player and be that light? I know Aisha Morrison, again, our draft show colleague from DallasCowboys.com. She had a chance to visit with him. He talked about playing at like 174, 175 pounds. I think it makes you feel a little bit better about him. But for him to measure at 166 pounds, with that frame and all that, man, this guy is super, super tough. But that kind of stuff scares me a little bit.
Yeah.
That scares me a little bit about that particular player. I was really interested to see how well these defensive tackles work out. Breesy from Clemson, I felt like did a pretty good job. Cansey from Pittsburgh, I felt like did a pretty good job. There were some guys in there, those defensive tackles, that were able to the testing numbers were really, really good. It kind of matched a little bit to where what was going on film. I honestly, the whole thing with Nolan Smith, I'm not surprised, but I didn't expect him to be that dominant a tester at that.
Yeah, he's a freak athlete.
Him, Van Ness, those guys. Young from Tennessee. I mean, there were some guys I thought that tested very, very well that helped themselves during this combine.
Any concern? Obviously, the testing was incredible, but any concern for you just in general that we're talking about Nolan Smith as a 6'2" guy who has arms under 33 inches?
Yeah, I mean, I didn't move him out of the second round. I kind of have Nolan Smith, Ojulari, McDonald, Van Ness. Those are the guys I kind of have in that second round pocket there for those defensive ends. I didn't see Nolan Smith as a first round player. I liked Wilson from Texas Tech as an edge, Anderson from Alabama, Murphy from Clemson. Those are my 3 first round guys, with Nolan Smith being the 4th guy of those edges. He'll probably go. I think that there'll be, by the time the Cowboys pick, I kind of felt like that maybe Nolan Smith would be a guy that's going to get to the Cowboys at 26. I don't have that confidence anymore. I just don't. We could have several of these defensive ends go before Dallas picks there at 26.
Back to Forbes, because it is just wild. Now the testing is incredible.
Yeah.
4.35 40, 37.5-inch vertical, 10-11 broad jump. His arms come in over 32 inches, 6'1". That's all great. But then you see 166 pounds on that.
It's so rare. It's so rare. I mean, rare
who are some really?
I can't even think, Bob. I can't even.
So I've got 2 names that come to mind.
I was racking my brain trying to figure out this myself.
I've got 3 names of guys that stand out to me as I remember being really big and really skinny at corner. And when I looked up the measurements on one of them, he was not as skinny as I remembered. The first one was Dre Kirkpatrick when he was coming out of Alabama.
Yeah,
he was pretty skinny, but he was 6'2", 186. So that's not nearly as bad. But the other 2 I came up with, one guy played a little heavier and was not as small, but Cordell Flott was that way. He was. But the one that I keep coming back to, the comparison for Forbes for me, is Rashard Robinson. Robinson was 6'1". He was 171, 32-inch arms. He was in the building with the Cowboys recently. But that's also not a great track record. I just named 3 guys who have not necessarily, hit it big. There's undeniable talent there, but can he put weight on? Who he reminds me of is, and I don't know if you'll remember this name because he went undrafted because of his size. You remember Jeremy Cottrell from Middle Tennessee State about 5 years ago?
Yeah, I do.
Cottrell was 6'2", 168. And Cottrell was that was the big thing for him with scouts, was they were like, he can't put on weight. He tries everything he can and he cannot do it. And so it makes you wonder if Forbes is there, because there's no way Forbes went into the combine wanting to weigh 166.
No, I see that as a problem for him to try and keep weight on. The guy is a hell of a player. God, he's a good player. but I think it's gonna be an issue with him. I really, really do.
So, Brian, one of the research projects that I like to do every draft season is I like to take a look at how the athletic testing looks at position groups and how, when you cross-reference it against the Cowboys' history of drafting players, how does their testing match up to what the Cowboys seem to think is their prototype athlete at the position? So, you take the data over the last 10 years or whatever it is of the corners they've taken, and you just kind of get a general average of what it is. You find out what's the highest number they've picked, whether it's the fastest 40, the most bench reps, whatever, the tallest guy, and then the very lowest threshold that they'll go to, the slowest 40, the worst 3-cone, the shortest arms. And then you can create a picture that says, okay, clearly this is not a hard and fast rule, these measurements that say we can't pick a guy if he comes in at this because they've picked somebody like that. So I've done that today with running back and corner. I've gotten their general measurements together and been able to sort of attack this a little bit. And after calculating where everybody stood, I came up with the 4 running backs and 4 corners who most look like a Cowboys athletic profile at the position. So I'm going to just
No, you didn't send this to my email address then. Is that what you're saying? Are you being a selfish teammate here with all this?
I got in a zone today and I started doing it and I tweeted it out. But I'm going to send
I actually retweeted it. I thought it was excellent work. I really did.
Well, thank you. I appreciate that. So we got 4 corners here, and I'll just name the first 2, or I'll name the last 2 because I'm going to ask you about the first 2. You watched the first 2. I don't think you've seen the other 2 yet. A couple guys that are of interest to watch here. You've got Julius Brents, cornerback from Kansas State.
Got to watch him. I have to watch him.
Man, you do. He's not a guy that I've watched yet, but just when you look at the athletic testing there, Brian, it's absurd. This is a corner 6'3", 198, 34-inch arms. Ran a 4.53 40, not blazing, but certainly workable. Then he hits the vertical 41.5. He hits an 11.6 broad jump, a 6.63 3-cone, and a 4.05 shuttle. That all is well within the range of the type of testing the Cowboys have typically loved with corners. And then the other one that's of some interest to me there is Mekhi Garner from LSU.
LSU, yeah.
Bigger corner, talking about 6'1.5", 212 pounds, 32-inch arms, 10-inch hands. He also ran just a 4.55 40, but he had a 1.54 10 split, some decent short area quickness, 38-inch vertical, and then a 10.8 broad jump. So 2 interesting ones there. But then the ones that I want you to kind of give us your thoughts on. Let's first, I know your number 1 corner, Joey Porter Jr. from Penn State, checks a lot of boxes for the Cowboys.
Yeah, Joey Porter. And when you start to talk about, he is he's corner number 1 for me on my board. And I love the fact that these lately here in the drafts, we've had these bloodlines for these corners of former NFL players. And of course, this is the son of former Steeler great Joey Porter himself. Yep. And he's got some of that fire that his father had. I mean, this guy's an outstanding tackler. He's ready, really quick at reading the play. He comes forward in a hurry. He'll wrap up guys. He plays press the majority of the snaps. He's just a hard guy to get away with from his length, his change of direction. It's funny, for such a long guy, his feet don't get out of whack. Sometimes when you have these long-limbed cornerbacks, it's hard for them to turn. They get real leggy, and they're not as quick. Porter's not that way at all. I mean, the read and react, everything about this kid is super, super positive. And I love this guy. I think the movement with him, I don't think that's a problem at all. I think you can play him on either side of the field, and you can maybe line up in the slot some, but you'd be hard pressed to find a corner in this draft that tackles as well as Joey Porter. And I think that's because of his old man was a fierce player that way.
Absolutely. Quick measurements on Porter. He came in at over 6'2.5", 193 pounds, 34-inch arms, 10-inch hands, 4'4", 640, 1.5'10" split, 35-inch vertical, 10.9 on the broad jump, and then still benched 17. Yeah. Those are all really good numbers. And then the other one, a guy that I think you have just below Joey Porter, Christian Gonzalez from Oregon, who, man, when you look at the testing, it's not quite to this level, but it's remarkably similar to Byron Jones.
Yeah, and this kid, when you watched, it's the drill at the combine that the Raiders brought in. Al Davis brought this drill in, where you start from just stand in your stance, and then they drive you back, and then you turn one way, you turn to left, turn right, turn left, turn right, and then they break you. Mm-hmm. Christian Gonzalez running that drill, the Raider drill, I call it. Man, he looks so smooth. And when you're talking about length, athletic ability, again, a guy that can play on either side, he plays really, really square. Like when I mean square, is he lines up head up, and he's not like sideways or cocked, but he's square. He'll break, he'll pedal. And then he's just so good, has such a good feel for how to keep himself in position. The fluidity that I mentioned, you saw that in the Raider drill. He gains a lot of ground in the way he plays. When he has to move and run, he just doesn't appear very stressed out at all. So the ball skills, how to play the ball in the air. This guy has a chance to be a very special player.
Then looking through the running back group, some of the guys that look like prototype athletes for the Cowboys and the way they typically have looked at running back. I'll name the first two that I know you haven't had a chance to watch yet. Chase Brown from Illinois.
Yeah.
Little bit of a stocky build, 5'9.5", 209 pounds, but Brian comes in with big old hands, 10-inch hands, 4.43 speed at 209. He's got a 40-inch vertical, he's got a 10.7 broad jump, and then on the bench press, he still put up 25 reps, which is really good. You got a guy somebody who can do 25 reps, jump 40 inches, and run 4.43 is definitely something that you should keep your eyes on in terms of going back and looking at what they can do on tape. And then Deneric Prince from Tulsa, another bigger built guy. 5'11 and 3/4, 216 on the weight, 4.41 speed, 35-inch vertical, 10.4 on the broad jump. So those are a couple guys. Then the other two that I know you've seen. First one, tell us what you think about Zach Charbonnet, the running back from UCLA.
I'll tell you what, Zach Charbonnet is super productive with the ball in his hands. I mean, there was a lot of times you watch those games at UCLA. The games I studied were Washington, USC, Utah. This kid's a transfer from Michigan. So he's not the type of guy that is going to run away from you, but he can make the initial guy miss and then run through the others. It's impressive how he's able to finish runs. He's got vision. He's got power. He'll punish tacklers. If he gets a chance, he's kind of a little bit of a slasher with his running style. He sees the lanes. He's always keeping the legs churning. Defenders bounce off him. You never see this guy get knocked back or stuffed at the line of scrimmage, but he plays in a scheme with Chip Kelly. We've seen this when he was with Philadelphia, that they get the ball from an inside handoff and then they find the crease. And so that's kind of how he does. Plays a little bit sideways and then takes off and goes. So I'm looking forward to seeing him in a scheme where he can play more downhill. But, man, this guy's got soft hands. He doesn't fight the ball. He can be tough catching the ball out in the backfield because of how he's able just to kind of run through guys. People really don't want to tackle him. He's a heck of a player. Really, really is.
And then really quickly, just to wrap up this segment, the other running back that tests very similar to a lot of the players the Cowboys have been interested in the past, even though he didn't run a blazing 40, Tank Bigsby from Auburn, a guy that seems to fit a lot of what the Cowboys have looked for in running back before.
I'll tell you what, I love this guy's toughness. I really, really, really do. And He's got outstanding vision. He's got lateral quickness. I think he's got more lateral quickness than he has really, really like true speed. But he can run himself out of trouble, when he gets, because I feel like he can cut on a dime. He makes big things happen with the ball in his hands. He turns little plays into really, really big ones. And I think inside out, no problem. He can make those explosive cuts, the wiggle, the shake to get out of those tackles. I mean, there's some lower body power to this guy. Short area, short yardage runner, goal line runner, really, really good. Now, I'm going to give you a guy, Bobby, real quick too, if I could. I know we're kind of up against it a little bit.
No, go ahead. Go ahead.
Just keep an eye on, if you haven't watched Kenny McIntosh from Georgia, keep an eye on him, because this guy is a real weapon as a pass catcher. There's a number of plays with the balls. I mean, he gets a lot of balls thrown his direction, not just underneath, but he throws down the field. And I'll tell you what, man, he is a guy that can finish when he gets down to the goal line. He's got a burst to get around the corner. I think he's a tough runner. He'll bounce off tacklers. He doesn't go down easy. But the thing I like about Kenny McIntosh the best is his hands and the way that he can catch the football.
McIntosh, not a guy with like when you talk about he can get around the corner, absolutely. When you look at the long testing speed, wasn't great. He tested at 4.62, but when you look at that 10-yard split, that initial burst, we're in a 1.54. He's got initial quickness that I think, does he have the long track speed? No, but the initial burst is really good.
Yeah, I mean, this is my final line about him. I said he's played some big-time games over his career and shown up well. Doesn't have home run speed, but runs well enough. That was the final line of my notes for Kenny McIntosh, running back from Georgia.
You are listening to the Love of the Star podcast. The Love of the Star is an Odyssey podcast. You can find it on the Odyssey app or wherever you get your podcasts. All right, Brian, it is now time for our favorite segment of the day. It is our Dean Julia Love of the Star mailbag. Let's go with the first question here from Mario. Let's play a game Broadus style, he says. Which would you rather have, an established free agent interior offensive lineman and a rookie wide receiver in the top 2 rounds, or a rookie interior offensive lineman and giving a second for DeAndre Hopkins?
Give me the rookie guard and give me the established wide receiver.
Why is that?
I feel like, though, to me, like this team, we saw last year what happened with Jalen Tolbert. I'm not saying that every player that comes through the Cowboys now, for Dak's sake, for Mike McCarthy's sake, I don't have time to be working with a rookie receiver that might not play. And like I say, if you fall behind or it's not working out, there's a lot of these receivers that have been plug and play. The Cowboys have done a great job, though, with the plug and play offensive linemen. They have. I mean, so I'll take the plug and play lineman and that wide receiver that I know is going to help Dak right off the jump, help Mike with his play calling right off the jump, instead of having to maybe wait. Yeah, I'm living for right now but this wide receiver group, I have less confidence in them as plug and play guys as I do the offensive linemen.
Next question here from Tyler Browning. He wants to get our thoughts on Nick Hampton, edge rusher, Appalachian State. I don't know. Have you watched him yet, Brian?
I have not seen him yet.
I've not seen him yet. I know you've seen the other one, though, and I have too, and so we can talk about him here. USC edge rusher, Tuli Tuipulotu.
Yeah, I'll tell you what, I really do like that kid a lot. And with Tui, and the thing that's really good about him is he's so relentless. And he's got some really impressive skills for a man his side. You can put pressure on the quarterback right away. He can get the corner. He's going to finish. He's a powerful guy. He does a great job of breaking down the blocker. His power and quickness can be hard to deal with. He gets off the ball that first step, the power to knock the blocker's hands away and then start moving towards the quarterback. He covers a lot of ground as a pass rusher. And so you can see him. He tracks the ball, good run defender. I think there's just so many. I think you can play him in a couple of different spots.
Yeah.
And he'll be just fine. But he's so physically impressive. I really I don't think there's anything that this guy can't do. I really, really don't.
Yeah, I think the thing that really jumps off the tape when you watch Tuipulotu is just the power, like the pop in the hands and the strength that he comes with. And he's, to me, I look at him as one of the more advanced like technique guys for me in this class at the edge. And you're right, he can play pretty much across any front. I think he's completely scheme versatile. Anybody who any scheme that needs a defensive lineman, I think could find a use for Tuipulotu.
Yeah.
And so those are some things that stand up for me. He's not super bendy. He's a little, tight in the hips, but incredibly productive. A really solid across the board defender, I think, in terms of rushing the passer, defending the run. And then I had this note the other day on him when I was doing some research, Brian. Since 2016, these are the Power 5 players with at least 10 sacks, 20 tackles for loss, and 3 passes defended. Harold Landry, Josh Allen, Chase Young, Alex Highsmith, Will Anderson, and Tuli Tuipulotu.
I like it.
Production.
I like it.
That's some serious production right there.
That is some production.
He did not test because of I think he was dealing with an injury. He'll test at USC. But did you happen to see what he measured in at? It may have gone under your radar because of the fact that he didn't test.
What was the measurements?
So he was.
I had him at 6'4", 290. Did I mess that up?
No. He played it. I think he played at 285, but he was 285, 290.
Yeah.
He came in at 6'3",
2
1/4 on the arm. Brian, he came in weighing 266.
Oh, geez.
He lost 20 to 25 pounds. Now this was a training decision. This was not something that this was a decision that he decided to make. I'm guessing it's for athleticism to be quicker.
Yeah, he probably went in a situation. What was his injury that he had? What was he doing? I'm trying to remember what he was doing. I didn't have it in my notes.
Yeah.
But anyway, if he dropped that much weight, somebody probably told him that he's going to play linebacker in this league. Is probably what it was. Either that or he didn't want at 6'4", 290. He didn't want to come in as being like a 5 technique defensive end in a 3-4.
Yeah.
So he's probably trying to be an edge, or they're moving him as a 3-4 outside linebacker that's really like playing an edge.
And our last question here from Hampton. Is there any update on where the Cowboys are at with re-signing Donovan Wilson? So I still don't have a good feeling about Donovan Wilson back. Not for lack of desire. I think everybody on the coaching staff wants him back. I think he wants to be back in Dallas. I think, Brian, I don't know about you, he is their tone setter on defense. Like he's the one who I think really sets the tone with physicality, with the edge that he plays with. He loves hitting people. I think it's contagious for everybody else on the defense. To me, your core leadership guys in terms of the way they get everybody else going on defense. It's Jaron Kearse, it's Micah Parsons, Trayvon Diggs, and then it's Donovan Wilson. And I think that if the Cowboys want to play around with this one a little bit and get a little cute with the market, they're going to lose him because I think there is going to be a market outside of Dallas for him potentially. I'm not ruling anything out. I'm not saying he's not coming back, but I think the Cowboys are going to have to step up in a way financially that they haven't shown they're willing to with safeties in the recent history.
Yeah, I think you're absolutely right, Bobby. We have the tampering period there for a couple of days. I think we'll learn a lot. I think there's a good possibility that this guy is going to be gone in the first 4 days of free agency. I don't think you're going to get him to the second or third week, which is generally the area that Dallas likes to play in. This guy is highly respected. He's tough. He plays a little reckless, but man, he is a really, really good tough player. Now, I'll say this: the draft has a pocket of those safeties between rounds 2 and 5, probably 10 guys right there that very well could be fill-in guys if you have to. Maybe somebody says, I would rather draft one of those guys than pay Wilson. But I'll tell you what, man, that is a hell of a football player And I think the first 4 or 5 days of free agency is going to tell the story on him.
It's going to be something interesting for us to watch. We're just about a week. We're under a week away from the beginning of free agency. We will have all those updates for you guys. Hopefully have an update on where things stand with Odell Beckham Jr. And we'll continue to bring more of our draft coverage to you as we are just
49 days. 49 days.
Yeah, we're about 6 weeks out from the NFL draft and figuring out which direction the Cowboys go. For Brian Broaddus, I'm Bobby Veltz. We will talk to you guys again next time.